And we are live. Welcome to a very special edition of the Red Man Group. We don't have an episode number for this one because we are kind of doing this as a family special edition of the Red Man Group. We've done this before. Hunter and I and Tex and Tanner have done this before. And so we got such a strong response from the last special edition that we did for sort of the Red Man Father or the Red Man, the married Red Man kind of thing. That we decided we're going to experiment a little bit and see if we don't want to make this sort of a regular feature of the Red Man Group. We got a lot of new features coming up, or new plans, I should say, for the 2019 year for the Red Man Group. If you don't know about it just yet, we are going to do a year in review episode on Saturday. This Saturday at our regular time, which is, 9 a.m. or 9 a.m. No, am I wrong? 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern for Saturday. And we will be doing sort of a year in review wrap up, and we will be talking about what our plans are for the future. So what you're watching right now is the Red Man Group. I guess this is going to be called the Fatherhood edition, or the Fatherhood special. A lot of guys, I think that the red pill is something that can be broadened a little bit more. A lot of people want to say that the red pill is only about picking up chicks, right? It's only about pickup artistry. It's only about game. It's only about hypergamy, right? It's only about whatever it is that happens to be the most pressing interest of whoever gets into it. Well, I am of the opinion that the red pill ought to be expanded into some other arenas here, and one of those is the married red man, married red man group, red pill. So, what we're going to talk about today, today's topic is going to be the red pill father and the issues about raising the next generation of kids in from a red pill aware perspective, and what can a red pill parent do. So we're going to get into some questions about that today. Today I have Drew Bay, who is with me, and I've also got, I'm going to hope I don't screw this up, I got Jack Murphy with me as well, who is the author of Democrat to Deplorable. He's got his own podcast, and I'll let him talk about that in a bit. We've got Pat Campbell, who, as you know, I do on my own channel. I do Red Pill 101 with Pat, and then Pat also has his own terrestrial radio show that what I'm on it anyways, is on Friday mornings at 9:05 Eastern. I've got Ryan Stone, who is are you still the moderator for the Red Man, or for the Married Red Pill? I think you still are. So he is I'm
believe still on there, but
you're still on.
Yeah, my account's been restricted to doing fuck all.
So. Oh, geez. Okay. Well, I'm bringing Ryan in on this because I want sort of a devil's advocate going here. I've also got Tanner Guzy. Did I say that right, Tanner? Yes. Tanner is the proprietor of Masculine Style, and he's got his own book, which is called The Appearance. Is it The Appearance of Power? I think that's what it was.
Yep, The Appearance of Power.
Appearance of Power. Oh, there it is in the back. And we have Texas Dom with us, who was on our last show. Tex is a married man and has his own special take on marriage and masculine dominance. I've also got Rich Cooper from Entrepreneurs and Cars, and also a host of the Red Man Group. So this is almost like an all-star cast. This is really cool. And then last but not least, I have Hunter Drew, who is the family alpha, and Hunter is going to be our host for this show. I am just going to be directing traffic a little bit for this and just throwing out some questions and just keeping the conversation going along. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pass this off to Hunter, and I'm going to let Hunter just sort of take it from here.
Awesome. So let's kick this thing off. To begin with, I have a son and a daughter. So something I've been talking about from the beginning, I've got the blog split into three. There's masculinity, there's marriage, and there's fatherhood. And like you touched on earlier, the red pill covers all that. I use the red pill awareness in every aspect of my life and what it is I'm doing. It's not something that you just do when you're trying to get chicks. It's who you are. It's an awareness of the reality of the situation we're in. And I'm glad we're doing this episode with fathers, and everyone on here, has literal skin in the game of what it is that we're trying to do and the message that we're pushing. Mm-hmm. So with these conversations and getting this going, there are a lot of men out there who have kids, and they're trying to navigate these waters of, I know the obstacles I'm facing, Well, you see what they're doing to your children as well. It's not just a play against men. It's not like, 18 and up are the only ones that are getting challenged and getting, questions on how you're going to perform. Are you supporting the narrative? All those things. Our children are as well at a young age. And I think a great way to start this off would be how we're applying that red pill awareness into raising our children and what's separating you from those other dads out there. We talked about the plugged in man, the AFC, who's just floating through life. I can tell you right now, due to my knowledge and what we have in the conversations and the knowledge being shared here, swapping the notes, as Ryan says, I can tell you, you see it in the kids. I coach my son's baseball team. I can tell whose dad is involved with that kid, who's raising them, who's being involved, has a presence in their life, and who's just, letting that kid be raised by the society, let him be raised by the community, the village, if you will.
Right.
So I think a great way is for guys to jump in and, the different ways that we're all approaching this subject.
Yeah, I was going to just say just briefly here before we jump in whole hog here. When I talk about the village, what we're referring to is sort of I want to say left wing maybe, but this idea that it takes a village to raise a child. This is like something that Hillary Clinton said, and actually she stole it from somebody else. But the idea is that it takes a society to raise kids, and what I'm seeing right now, from going through writing what I have, when we talk about the blue pill, I always talk about the blue pill as a form of conditioning, and that conditioning comes from a lot of different areas. It comes from our parenting, it comes from our media, it comes from our popular music, our popular culture, ethnicity, our acculturation. All of this is what I sort of refer to as the village. So when I say it takes a village to raise a kid, what that says to me is it's the influences that are pressing in on that kid to influence the way that kid is going to grow up and that kid is going to be later on in life. So when we talk about the village, that's what we're really talking about. I just use that as just sort of a quick, easy reference, but I think probably the best thing to talk about here, or maybe we can just start the conversation off, is what do you guys see the difference between, say, a guy who is a red pill parent and a guy who is just sort of going along to get along, or a blue pill parent?
So I'll jump in on that one. Yeah.
Okay.
So just to kind of set the stage for you guys who don't know me, I have 2 daughters, a son, and then another daughter who she's due on Sunday. So she could be here any minute now. Yeah. So obviously some skin in the game and very invested. And I think one of the things that's so interesting about this idea of the village is, I think one of the reasons why it's so pernicious is because, yes, it's true. You can see families that are so super isolated that they're not functional except for within the dynamic of that family itself. And so on a fundamental level, we understand that it does take more than just the nuclear family to raise a functioning and a well-adjusted human being. The problem with the way that Clinton or anybody else portrays this is that village can replace the parents. When the reality is the village is there to supplement what the parents are doing. The parents are primary. You as dad have to be primary. It may not be that you were the most primary as far as involvement and things like that. My kids are way more attached to their mom right now than they are to me just because of their ages. But they also know that I'm the one who sets the tone within the relationship. They also know that mom looks up to me, that there are no decisions made without my say-so on them. And we have a very intentional family culture that creates that. And then that's either supplemented by the village or that goes against the village. And so that way it gives them the opportunity to either identify with people who are like us or recognize that there are people who are not like us, and they become even more ingrained in the identity of who they are as Guzzies, as opposed to just, well, we're whoever because everybody's the same from where we're from. So I think it has to be both. But yeah, the big thing for us is creating that very intentional family culture. We are Guzzies. We do things differently than other people, even other Guzzies, and then helping them understand that identity gives them permission to be different. Because I think one of the hardest thing for a lot of young kids being raised in a red pill community is that you are going to be different. You're going to be weird and you're going to see the world differently. And that's hard to cope with unless you can fall back to the idea that your family is your basis, not the village is your basis.
I think that brings up a great point also when we talk about men having authority. Do you have an authority in that relationship? If you have authority over your family, there are a lot of parents who judge other parents and they're trying to stay in that you don't want to make waves. You don't want to step out of line. The man who does have authority over his family is the one who says no. It's great that family does this and they believe this and they want to do it that way. But in our home, we're not going to do that. A great example is letting your kid play Fortnite or whatever the new fad is. You know, if you're the parent who says, no, you're not allowed to play this game, you know, other parents will say, well, why are you not letting your kids? And all of a sudden that mirror comes up and it's reflecting on them. Oh shit, my kid's being raised by a screen. I don't want to accept that I'm a bad parent. So I'm going to say they're wrong. There's something wrong with them for breaking from the narrative. So there is a risk when you have authority and you break the ranks and you start doing things your own way, the village will start looking at you and they will start asking questions.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of what when we talk about the village, I think a lot of it is sort of this normalization. This is just from my own perspective. I have a 20-year-old daughter. I've been a father for at least 20 years now. So, but unfortunately, I don't have a son, so I can't really say one way or the other when it comes to this kind of stuff. But it's been from my experience and for what I've seen over the last 20 years, is there has been this active, I guess an attack, on boys, on conventional masculinity. It seems to me like there has been this attempt to sort of erase conventional masculine ideals from boys at such a very early age. I mean, I was just looking the other day. I think Pat and I were talking about the kid that Desmond kid who was the drag queen at 11 years old, stripping at a gay bar, and we see this on Good Morning America. And I'm watching this, I'm saying, how is this not just appalling to people? How is, people are cheering this on. And when I see that, to me, you want a definition of the village. That's the village right there. It's this praise or this idea that we can all be parents, or we all should be parenting that next generation, and that we should all influence them. And that's one of the reasons I want to talk about this, is because I really feel, and this is really the premise of my third book, I really feel that it is necessary for this generation of red pill aware men to raise the next generation, because I'm scared to see what's going to happen in the next couple of generations here. And if this is where we're headed right now, what's it going to look like in the future? But I mean, do you guys see that as well? I mean, what do you guys have any input as far as the village is concerned?
Yeah. Let me jump in on that. I think I'm the winner of the Breeders' Cup here, because I've got 5 children. I've got 3 girls, 2 boys. I think that's the most out of the pack. So I've got some experience. My oldest is 26. My youngest is 15, so I'm in a whole, different group of age ranges. It's absolutely critical that mom and dad be on the same page, and that they act together as a team in unison at all times, especially on the critical matters. Because if they're not on the same page, if they have different positions on things, kids pick that up, and it's almost a guarantee that your kids are going to be screwed up. I remember I used to teach before I got into radio. I wondered why kids were the way they were until my first parent-teacher conference, and I got to meet mom and dad, or sometimes just mom, or sometimes just dad. And it's like, oh, your kids are a mirror of what's going on in your house. And you talked about the village, and I look at this as a former educator myself, especially when it comes to public schools. The village, their job is to undo everything you've done at home. If you're sending your kids to public schools, there is a sinister ploy to basically change your children, everything you're putting in at home, because the schools have so much more time with your kids now than you actually did. But it's critical that you be on the same page. And I see so many men out there who, because they don't want to rock the boat, they don't want to, cause problems at home, they abdicate their authority, they abdicate their responsibility, and let mom make the calls. And it's almost always a prescription for disaster. It just doesn't work out.
I got to hit the unmute button there.
There you go.
There we go. Yeah, I just want to shout out to the super chats. First of all, we've had some very generous ones that have come in. So thanks again for your support, guys. We really do appreciate it. Putting out this content is a bit of a joy and a labor of love for us. I just wanted to add to what Pat was saying. I really echo that sentiment. And there was a video that I did a couple of years ago about why today's men are so feminized. And I don't have a son, I've got a daughter. And I got to tell you, I mean, I'm fearful for boys today, like the kind of stuff they got to put up with. The way that they call it school, but it's really an indoctrination system. The way that it teaches children. And again, I'm more fearful for the way that it teaches boys. I mean, when I found out that we were pregnant when I was married, I was actually hoping that it was a boy. I was hoping it was going to be a son. And today I'm grateful actually that it's not, that I've got my daughter, because I mean, the shit that boys are up against today, it's tough. And what we're all talking about here has legs. I mean, this just doesn't apply to making better men, you know, for the future to pass on the red pill knowledge. It's also useful and helpful to women as well. So I'm going to step back and let you guys kind of chime in a little bit more here, and I'm going to stay in the comments. But again, thanks to everybody for those super chats.
Hey, Tex, you had something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've shared this story a lot, but you know, I was very blue pill and in one of those equality type relationships. It's sort of the way it went. My son's 28 now. He's been red pilled now for a couple of years. I've got grandkids now that I'm watching go through this. So what you guys are experiencing with some of your young kids, I'm seeing with my grandkids. I can tell you one thing: when the kids grow up and they see mom and dad, like Pat was saying, not on the same page, or they see them wrestling for control, it confuses the living hell out of them. They don't know what they're supposed to do when it's time for them to have a relationship. So it's just real important that you set the bar early while you can. You know, I have a chance now again with the grandkids, and that's the key thing right now, is to make sure that mom doesn't allow them, you know, in a perfect world, social justice mom that my daughter has become, one's dressing up like a unicorn for Halloween. The other, I think she would be really happy if he turned out to be trans at some point. I mean, this is like her ultimate attention-seeking thing, I think, would be if her kids were all totally cool. So, you know, as a grandpa now, I'm on the hunt to make sure this stuff doesn't happen, and stepping in and being vocal and making sure I take them fishing, I take them hunting, I take them, you know, any kind of sports thing we can do, anything we can do together, getting out of the house and getting out in front of that video game, and just not letting what's been trying to go on happen and stopping it. So that's all I got.
When they look at you, they're looking at your example. You know, what it is that you're doing. They're not going to follow the advice of, yeah, go out and play. No, you know, grandpa, you go out and play. Show me what a man does. Show me what a man is like. What do men do in a relationship? My children are younger. And obviously, some of the guys here have older kids, so they'll hit what it's like, you know, dealing with that age. But my son is 9. My daughter is 6. They're learning through my example what men do. And a lot of men don't realize they play an equally important role in their daughter's life as they do their sons. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about, you know, when they're going to the schools, let's dial it back just in the home. You know, you're setting that example. Your daughter's going to see this is what a man does, and this is how men and women interact. And if I want a relationship like this, I'm going to find a man like that. That's the example that you set for her. And your son, he wants to emulate you. This is what men do. And it is so important. You know, I don't remember who said it, but somebody was talking about schools, Pat, saying that schools are trying to undo everything you're teaching them. That is why it is so critical that you don't let up. Your foot doesn't come off the gas. You reinforce, yeah, it's cool to have a beard. It's okay to be competitive. You don't always have to share your feelings. You know, that, and come on, let's go do hard man things and let the ladies do the lady things. And that's okay. And you've got every single day, bring them with you when you work out, bring them with you every chance you can. They need to see that. These boys, they don't have many examples.
Right. I was going to say, I'll get to Jack. I'll get to you in just a second here. I just want to say that I see this kind of systematic disempowerment, but it's like removing of authority from male figures in the household. If you read my 3rd book, I go into a lot of detail about how today we want men to have all this responsibility, but we don't want to give them any authority. And it's gotten to the point, I think, where we have had all of these sort of men today are either ridiculous or they are potentially violent. Okay. So there's only the abusive daddy, and there's only the ridiculous Homer Simpson, you know, Dr. Huxtable daddy right now. And so we can either laugh at him, and mommy needs to, he's basically a big child, and he's one of the kids in the house that mommy has to take care of, or else he's a potential abuser and we're all afraid of daddy. And I think that's something that has been deliberately institutionalized right now. So what I see happening, and maybe you guys can chime in on this as well. I see that we're making men superfluous in the household. We're making we want to say that they're very important, but we don't. We want to say a woman can do everything. We want to praise single mothers. We don't really pay too much attention to single fathers, and simply because we don't trust them. First of all, they don't get that authority. We don't want to give them authority over their kids. We don't want to give them authority over their wives. And so I think that if there is a point of separation or a division between, like, say, a blue pill father and a red pill father, it's that guy who actually can step in and be a good authority figure, can be a good, you know, he's actually a good conventionally masculine male role model within that family. And I'll get to another point later on, but I want to get to Jack here. Jack, you had something to say?
I do. First, guys, thanks a lot for having me on. So many things to address here. First thing I want to talk about is sort of like the difference between community and the village. So I think the way we're using it is sort of the village is like the negative perspective and connotation of community, because I think for me personally, and I know you guys as well, like community is important for raising our kids. It's important for raising, building a nation. It's important for the context in which everything is happening with your children and with our own lives. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge this difference between the village in its pernicious sense and the community in the positive sense, and that I, for one, am really trying hard to be a part of, as well as use that opportunity as a way to transmit some of these ideas and to lead by example. One of the things about education that you guys have brought up, and I talk about this a lot too, but it's important to remember a couple of things. One, teaching young children is not a job that men are generally inclined to do, and there's very natural reasons for it. And so you end up with institutions, education, especially elementary school and middle school, where it's just dominated by women. And so it's very predictable to say what the political viewpoints and sort of the relationship dynamics that kids are going to get away, out of an environment like that. But let's not kid ourselves and act like this is the first time that schools have been teaching things that families don't want them to learn. I mean, if you watch like, I don't know, Archie Bunker show or whatever, dad's complaining about what they're learning at school all the time. And it's like, this is something that has been going on for a while. And I think that there's a system that you can implement to sort of overcome this. And that is actively, daily engaging with your children, asking them what they were taught at school, having conversations in the car when you pick them up or drop them off, having conversations at dinner, and systematically, religiously listening to what they're being taught at school and offering another perspective. Now, the perspective that I offer isn't always a counterpoint to what they've been taught. What I try to teach them is a system, right? It's like, analyze what they're saying and why they're saying it. What are their motivations? Why would they be teaching you something like that? What is that perspective? I think I've got my son now. I can ask him, I said, and Jake, or what's the answer? And he says, well, somebody somewhere is making money, right? Like I've got them trained to think about it systematically rather than like try to, because there's no way that I'm going to be able to cover every single point that they get taught at school, right? But I have to give them tools so that they can hear what they're being taught, and then run it through a system that we're trying to create in their head. And one last thing before I hand it off back to you guys, I can't imagine. I'm divorced, right? And I've been divorced for a long time, and I've been with my girlfriend, partner, almost wife, whatever you want to say, for a number of years, and we have built very deliberately a home environment that reflects the values that I think that a lot of us share. And so we lead by example within our own family every day, the way that our own home is organized, the way our schedule is organized, the way that our discussions and decision-making is done. And unfortunately, I can see that their mother's household is completely the opposite. The guy that she, remarried is the antithesis of what we would recommend, for like a healthy masculine persona. And the household is run by like feminine fear, right? Because there's like the expression of fear and a constant state of worry is sort of endemic to, the other gender, it seems. And like, there's no one there to put the kibosh on that and to be the rock and to like be the stable presence in the household. And so the kids come back from their moms, with that sentiment, with that energy. So like I'm living this, like seeing it from both perspectives, but then also like leading a very deliberate and structured life. And like, if I can give any recommendation to the guys out there, it's like build a system to counteract what's happening at school by teaching your kids a system rather than going day by day, point by point by point. And then also just lead by example as best as you can in every which way, including in your community and including at home and at the dinner table.
I like that. That's great. Especially the teaching kids critical thinking skills, which I think is something that is very remiss these days.
I was just going to add to that. The whole critical thinking part is entirely missed by the school system. They don't want you to critically think. They want you to think within the box. They want you to color within the lines. They don't want you to challenge the norm. They want you brainwashed and thinking in a way that, supports a larger school system, a bigger government, and, you know, the feminine primary social order. So I think it's really important as a father that you challenge beliefs and ask your kids questions like, why do you think it's done that way? And do you think there might be a better way to do it? And you do this with your boys and girls. It doesn't matter what, you know, what you're dealing with. I think that you should encourage them to critically challenge certain beliefs and ideas, because that's been the biggest pivot, I think, for most men anyway, that come to the red pill, that experience of trauma, is to challenge their old set of beliefs, to challenge their old set of ego investments. And I think if you teach kids how to do that at a younger age, they'll be more open to new ideas and other ways to view the way that the world works.
I put out today, you know, I was an absolute mess when I was going through the school system. And I realized, you know, the angle I'm taking with my children is the schooling system itself is supplemental to what you teach in the home. It is the bare minimum. People think, you know, you had this child. It is not the government's responsibility to educate that child on all matters. That is, you know, the baseline, the foundation. You know, you should be teaching at home. You know, maybe it could be a very intentional course that you create for them to follow. You know, maybe it's just you want to bring them out and get experiences, go see historical sites, you know, learn to think about things a little bit differently. Like you said, ask those questions in a certain manner that gets them thinking differently. You know, they need to know how to thrive in their school setting, whatever it may be, as well as in society. And those don't link up. You know, you can't just be a drone. And a lot of people, I'm looking at the chat, are saying, oh, just homeschool, duh, right. That's it. That goes back to the point where like, oh, just don't get married. There are people who already are married. There are people who are going to continue to get married. There are people who don't have the option of homeschooling their children. You know, that is just the fact. That is where we live. That is the reality that we're in. So these discussions need to be had. We can't just toss it and say, oh, just homeschool, that's it. No. For many kids, they're going to be in public situations. My kids, they're in a charter school. So it's a little bit better than public, but not quite homeschooling. You know, but we can't just brush it to the side. We need to have these conversations. We need to get it flooding out there. We need to get people recognizing if your kid's in public school, you need to play a more active role in the home.
I think one of the greatest threats to the village or to that sort of social narrative is guys like us, is stepping in and being that guide. And I think that you're going to see, particularly in the future, you're going to see even more pushback against exactly this. One of the reasons I wrote the third book was because I knew that it was going to aggravate. I see raising kids or mentoring kids. I think, as DDJ was saying, it's multi-generational mentoring. Whether you're a grandfather or you're, you know, maybe you don't have any kids whatsoever, you can still be an influence to that kid, because it's more than just the school. It's more than just it's popular culture. It's wherever they can get it. I mean, you got to understand, kids are like sponges. I think that's what they say. Anyways, Pat, you had something to say?
Yeah, a couple things here I want to weigh in on. You know, we heard Rich and Jack talking about critical thinking, and both of these guys, if you watch their podcast, they're both critical thinkers. That is a lost art in this day and age. And I think it was Jack that brought up listening. When I was growing up, I had a mentor. His name was Joe Wachter, a guy that lived in our neighborhood. He was about 17 years older than me, but his gift was he was a great listener. And a lot of parents don't listen to their kids. They talk to their kids, they talk at their kids, but they don't listen to their kids. And it's something that I've had to struggle with myself, especially as a radio talk show host, because I'm usually, my brain's going like 100 miles an hour, and somebody's talking, but I'm already thinking about the next question. You know, so it's just the way I'm sort of programmed at this point. But listening, I can't say enough about that, especially with kids, especially in their teen years. And somebody else brought up boys and girls. I think it might have been Hunter. I think girls need dads even more than the boys do. They both need them, but the girls desperately need the fathers, especially, you know, during those critical years, 12, 13, 14, 15, high school, which can be hell for the girls. They need you more than they ever do. But there was a great line from the original Iron Man film with Tony Stark. Is it better to be feared or respected? And I say, is it too much to ask for both? And I used to feel that way, but I don't. Okay. I want to be respected. I don't want to be your friend. I'm your dad. Anybody can be your friend, but not anybody can be your dad. I'm your dad. Maybe when you get older, when you grow up, I can be your friend too. But for right now, I'm your dad, and I need to be respected, okay? And the fear thing, now, a guy like me, just physically, I'm intimidating. And if your kids are afraid of you, they'll lie to you because they don't want to make you mad. They don't want to make you angry. And you've got to take down that facade and let them know that home is the safe place. It's the one place where you should be able to just let down your hair, and everything's okay, and you don't have to worry about what's going on in the rest of the world. That's what an ideal home should be, and that's why having the right mother is critical to that household.
Exactly. Drew, you had something to add to this?
Yeah, some people in the chat had mentioned about how schools aren't teaching people how to do taxes, balance a budget, and all these other skills. That attitude is part of the problem. You shouldn't be relying on the school to teach all these things. The function of school is to teach literature, math, science, history. It's your job to give your children all of these other life skills. If you're going to abdicate that kind of stuff to the school, you're also abdicating control over what's going into their heads. Going on a little bit with what Pat said too, as far as the importance of daughters. I don't have a daughter. I've got a son, but I've got nieces. And fortunately, my brother and my brother-in-law are pretty good role models for this. I think one of the most important things you can do as a father, if you have a daughter, is set an example by how you treat your wife to what they should expect from a man. And going the other way, it's important that your wife understand that how she treats you is going to set an example for your son of the kind of treatment that he should expect. So it goes both ways there, but absolutely have to have a strong father figure if you want your daughter to be raised to understand what she should be looking for in a man. Because if you're not there, well, you guys know of all the alternative crap that you could end up with.
Yeah, I having raised a daughter from 0 to 20, I can fully relate. In fact, a lot of guys want to look at me and they want to say, well, how do I get what you got? How do I get a successful red pill marriage? How do I get what you have? And it's what I don't like to use myself as, like, say, a template for other guys, like, say, just follow along with this and you'll be successful. But what I always say is, like, one of the key elements of my marriage and my being a father has been that red pill awareness and understanding intersexual dynamics. It's like a lot of the stuff. This is when I first started the show. I wanted to say, hey, look, red pill is not just picking up girls, it's understanding intersexual dynamics, and that is applicable to a lot of different aspects of life. One of the biggest compliments I think that I get from my daughter is that when I watch her dating guys, like, she's got a boyfriend now, right? I look at this guy and I go, is this somebody that I think that I would like to have as, say, a son-in-law? And I never have thought that way in my life, but, like, now I'm getting to that point where it's like, do I really want this guy in the family? And so you're starting to kind of apply this red pill awareness to an understanding of, you're going to be blending a family. You're going to be attached to that family kind of structure. So it's like your family values, like what Tanner was just saying a little bit, your family values end up getting melded with another person's, family and maybe their values as well. And I think that's one of the things that we kind of overlook, particularly in this. I mean, I know, Rich, your daughter's what, like 7 or 8 or something like that right now. And I think that,
yeah, I'm muted. Sorry. Yeah.
So you're not really thinking about that at this stage, but, like, I didn't either when my daughter was, like, 7 or 8. But now that I'm thinking about this, I look at I used to think it was, like, horrible to want to arrange marriages or to set things up so families could get along with families. And now I think I have a different opinion of that. I see the logic. I don't know if it's really practical, but I see the logic in that. And so it's like, how am I going to go from being, say, a red pill father and, seeing my daughter's, the guys she's selecting right now, the guys that she's with, actually remind me a lot of me. So at least that's a compliment. At least I know that I have sort of instilled something in her where she's looking for, she's looking for that kind of model, I guess, of masculinity in another guy. And so that's real compliment, like, that's a compliment, it's a big ego stroke, but I think it's also very, very important that you have to do that. But go ahead. We had Jack was next, I think.
I think Tanner's hopping in.
Oh, Tanner.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back, especially because a lot of the guys were talking about homeschool being the solution, and I think I'm the only one in here. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but my wife and I are homeschooling, and I think we're the only ones in the group who are doing that.
I homeschooled down in Florida for about 5 years.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we're obviously in the thick of it, dealing with all this right now. And I will say, from our experience, or at least from our perspective, not having done any public school, I can see the potential of the superiority of homeschooling, especially being a location independent dad with my work, so that I can work from home. And when we want to do American history, we can go do that for 3 months when they're older and they're capable of handling it, because I'll be able to work on the road and things like that. But I think that homeschooling is parenting on hard mode, because the level of involvement that you have to have with your kids just goes up a notch. I think it makes even marriage something that is even that much more difficult, because you and your wife, you really have to vet in order to find a wife who's not only willing, but very capable in being able to go the route of homeschool, because it's just another step in removing yourself from the village and kind of the cultural expectations of, well, everybody does things the blue pill way. And so, yes, I do think that there's a huge potential for superiority in it. And I think that the internet is going to continue to make it easier, but it's never going to be the easy option. And there's a lot of work involved on everybody's part that goes into it. And so you have to go into it with both eyes open. Otherwise, it's going to end up being worse for everybody.
One of the things that I loathe about public education, and even or private schools, like parochial schools, you got to understand, schools do one thing. They teach conformity. They teach you to, be a certain way, act a certain way. I loathe and detest conformity. In fact, people that are going to be successful in the coming years are not going to be the ones that conform. They're going to be the ones that think outside of the box, that don't fit in nicely into those pegs. And those are the kind of people we stifle in school, especially when it comes to boys. We load them up with Ritalin, whatever, just to control them so that they learn to conform. But homeschooling, and I've had experience with private schools, public schools, and homeschooling. Homeschooling by far is the best. If I had everything to do all over again in retrospect, I would have homeschooled all of my kids K through 12.
Jack, you were next. I think you were.
Yeah. I wanted to circle back to something that Pat said earlier, which was about sort of how do you present yourself to your children? And I worked in education, and I also have sort of experienced this. We talk about code switching, right? Which is where you have like a certain style of communication and language and vernacular and presentation and attitude, demeanor with one group of people, with another group of people, with another group of people. And I can think of at least 3 very distinct ways that, we have to code switch now with your children, which is out in public. Right. There's one way, and sort of in the community, especially for me when I used to coach Little League baseball, just sort of how I interacted with the other parents and with the other coaches and umpires and whatever. And your kids see that. And then there's a way that you interact with your primary, woman, your wife at home. That's another type of language. And then there's the way that you interact with your children when you're tucking them in. And it's just you, and you're in the room with them, and you have to. Maybe I get a little grief for this, but there's a different layer of vulnerability that you have to offer your children in those moments. And you have to, be even more empathetic than you may be in ordinary situations. And you even have to be unafraid to be emotional with them, because that is the one space in which they really, truly 100% have to feel safe and understood and able to take risks, right? Because the kids have to be able to feel like they can share those feelings inside of them that are making them uncomfortable. And it's not the same way that you interact with the father of a kid on your baseball team is not the way that you're going to elicit an honest reveal from your children when they're in bed and they have something that's bothering them and they don't want to tell you. And I think it's just interesting that we should just be cognizant of the fact that there are different modes and methods of communication that send signals to your children, and they're not always all the same. Like when you think of like masculinity, there are moments in which you need to be vulnerable and open and emotional. And I think it's those times with your children it's in the dark and it's like 9 o'clock and you're tucking them in and they feel finally safe and they're finally talking to you, completely different than at the dinner table, completely different than, out on the road. And so, sometimes, honestly, I'm very pleased that we're doing this fatherhood conversation, because there's, I'm by no means an expert, but I do have 3 kids, and I've been doing this for almost 15 years. And I've done a ton of reading, and I've thought about this quite a bit. And I think it's great for us to try to bridge the gap between what it's like to go out and meet women and handle a relationship with a woman versus how to handle a relationship with your wife versus how to handle a relationship with your 14-year-old daughter. And on one last tip, and I think we're going to change topics right after this, so I'm going to throw out one last little story. There is a certain element of running game on your own children. And I've discovered that with my almost 14-year-old daughter, that when she's in a crappy ass mood, I used to be like, honey, what's wrong? Can I help you? Is there something I can do to help you? And dude, that never worked. It just made her feel worse. It just made her upset. It ruined our dynamic, ruined everything. When she starts to do that now, I just kind of look at her and just kind of turn away and just start doing something else. And in like 2 minutes, man, boom, somehow something just flips and she just comes right around. And it's like those same kind of things of just not rewarding negative behavior that you like learn the very first thing when you start reading about game. It kind of works. I mean, it's the beauty of this whole thing is that, as Rollo kept pointing out, it's not game. It's not just pickup. It's not this. It's not. It's interpersonal dynamics. It's intersexual dynamics. It's basically just like how to be a reasonable human being and interact with other people. And we're not getting that education anywhere else. And so that's why I think this group's really valuable. So it's really just fascinating. So many things we could talk about.
Tex, did you have one last thing you want to talk about?
Yeah, one last thing. Rollo, you were talking about potential son-in-law material and that type of thing. I will tell you that most girls are in that age bracket are going to start looking for guys that are a lot like their dad. And that just seems to be a universal truth. So if you're a douche to your wife and you're a total idiot to other people, and she's going to bring that guy home, and guess what they're going to do next? They're going to make kids. And so whether they stay married or not, you are going to end up dealing with that guy for the next 18 plus years. So keep that in mind when you're setting that example.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all of these things like, you don't realize the repercussions of the actions that you do, when she's younger or up to where you are, because eventually what you do when she's young and the model you set for masculinity in her life. And we had some guy on the chat asking about, what's the difference between, raising sons and raising daughters. I've got a question for that later on, but we'll get to that. But I think that we don't appreciate when we're, say, 30 some odd years old and we have a kid and we're kind of playing with that, our daughter at 5 years old, and then suddenly she's 20 years old, and you don't realize that it's like throwing a rock in a pond and watching the ripples. It's like what you did back then is now having repercussions on your own life later on, because who she decides to marry later on, you're going to be married to that family as well. I think we sort of don't do ourselves any favors when we think that, I know a lot of guys will say, well, I've got a kid and I got to pay child support, but once she's 18, oh, thank God I don't have to do that anymore. You're going to be that kid's father for the rest of your life. You're going to be supporting her in one way or another for the rest of your life. Even if you think that, your ex-wife is a complete bitch, you are still going to be attached to that person for the rest of your life. And I think we really don't pay too much attention to that. Anyway, I wanted to move on here a little bit, because I'm going to see if I can put Ryan on the spot here. Ryan, you are the only person of this panel that does not have any kids. So here's my question for you is, do you plan to be a father? Are you planning to be a father?
There
it is.
I like that one.
I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one.
Mm-hmm. So you don't have any plans.
Yeah.
You didn't wake up one morning and go, you know what, it would be great to have kids.
I've never had that thing that you guys have where you wake up and you're like, oh, it'd be great to be a dad today. I don't understand it. I wish I did. It sounds really great, and you guys are doing well. I've kind of come from the side, like I've had more divorces in my life than I think anybody in this panel. I think I'm up to 3 now as the kid. So I'm really taking, and I know fathers are very important, and that's the thing we always say, but I'll say this, and I think John, is he in the chat or is he in, he's in the YouTube chat. He was the same way. Like, we never really had it either, and we kind of figured it out. Now my sisters, I'll argue that the girls really did need a dad, and it kind of did fuck them up. But I try to focus more on that 50% of guys that aren't going to be able to see their kids grow up, or at least not do it full time. What are they going to do?
Well, I had the reason I'm putting you on the spot here is because when I was back in 2015, when I did the Man in Demand conference with was Goldman and Christian McQueen, I had a lot of guys coming up to me, and I was just completely flattered that they had it was either guys who brought their dads or their dads brought their sons to see me speak.
Cool.
Right? Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. But every one of these guys, and I get an email on this every so often, and guys will say, when is the best time to introduce your kid to the red pill, and or like when is the best time to hand my teenage son your
when should he offload his responsibility onto a book?
Exactly. Yeah, I know those things.
Like, dude,
the reason
actually, you know what? I got something good for this. I think I know where you're going with this one. So my stepdad, I couldn't stand him. We never talked. I think my name was my mom's little bastard until I was about 15. And we never had a conversation until one day when he had his hand around my neck and my brother was going to hit him with a bat. He was just one of those guys where if you didn't fight your old man, you weren't a man. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this, I learned a lot from him. I learned how to be tough. I learned how to get things done, how to be focused, but he wasn't my friend. He didn't really like me and he didn't really care about my feelings. But at the end of the day, I got to admit, he did get me to where I am today. So I do have to have some kind of gratitude for that. So yeah, that's why I'm kind of just sitting here a little awkwardly during all this. You guys are talking about parenting strategies and engagement and kindness. And I'm kind of, it's just not how I was raised. So
one of the reasons,
as far as how long you should wait, I mean,
one of the 40. Reasons, I was just about to say, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here to have your perspective, since you don't have any kids. I get a lot of questions from guys who say, when's the best time to have kids? Or how can I have, this is the question. They'll say, how can I have kids, but I don't want to get married? And maybe it's a MGTOW guy who's like, I can't get married. There's no way I'm going to ever sign up for marriage.
Don't.
But how do I have a kid?
You put your dick in her a couple times, and then nature does its thing.
Well, of course, yeah, right. But they don't want to have that connection with that woman. They just simply want to have the child. So I'm just going to say that I was going to ask is
well, you're going to want the connection with her.
I knew, and people ask me why this. I knew that I wanted to have just one kid. Right. Mm-hmm. That was it. I was because maybe I'm a selfish prick. Right. That's what everybody accused me of at the time. There's like, well, you're a prick. You should at least have a brother for her. And I was just not going to
always
do that.
Those things for you to sacrifice for something else. That's
what I'm getting at here is that, fatherhood, there's an element of sacrifice. Now, I wanted to ask, and we can just go down the panel here. Drew, how many kids do you have and were they planned?
I have one son who's 13, and he was not planned.
Okay. Jack, how many kids you got? Unmute your mic, Jack.
No, I just got it. I have 3 kids. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I have a 12-year-old son and a 13-and-a-half-year-old daughter. And the first one was definitely planned. And I'll never forget either, because this was like in the midst of my blue pill marriage and we weren't having any sex at all. But I'll never forget that moment because I saw it in her eyes. She knew it was the moment. She came and got me. She found me and she got it. Right. Mm-hmm. Like I'll never forget that. And it stood out like crazy. The other 2, they just kind of happened.
Was that you planning that one, or was it just like because something that she wanted? Like, did you get up one morning and say, you know what, I really want to have kids?
Definitely. I definitely wanted to have kids. I definitely at one point decided I wanted to get married. I wanted to be a family man. And then, the first one was definitely deliberate. The other 2 sort of happened. Obviously don't regret it for one single minute, man. They're like my 3 favorite things in the whole world.
I think I know what Pat's answer is going to be, but go ahead, Pat.
So I got a rather unique situation because I'm the oldest of 13. So I come from a really big Catholic family. Yeah, 13. And we weren't the biggest family on the block. There was a family around the corner of the Flatleys. They had 14. And there were several families in our neighborhood that had 10 kids. So it was just that was the neighborhood. That was the environment I grew up in. When I got married, you get married to have kids. That's the whole purpose behind it, And when I went into marriage, it was pretty much with the mindset, whatever God sends me. I never had a set number. I didn't say 1, 2, I didn't want necessarily just boys or just girls. My wife, since the time she was a little kid, always wanted to have 6 kids. So we fell one short. We had 2 miscarriages. Mm-hmm. But I never came in with a set number. I don't know too many guys. Well, Rollo said he had a plan with 1. But I don't know a lot of guys that have a set number going in. But I can rattle off a litany of women I know who had a set number going in. You know, either they wanted 2 or they wanted 6 or they wanted 8. And a lot of times with the bigger families, it was tied in with, you know, the Catholicism, Mormonism, some other faith. But as a guy thing, I never looked into it as, you know, a numbers game that I got to beat my brothers and sisters.
Right. And I think I know what Tanner's going to say too, but go ahead, Tanner. You might already have one on the way because I see you keep dropping out.
Yeah, so
you're going to have 4.
Let's go. Yeah, so we're number 4 is on the way. We've talked all the time about having 5 or 6, probably stopping there. Every single one of them has been as planned as they can be. I mean, there's been no birth control since we've been married. Honestly, if we could have had them closer together, that probably would have been even better. And yeah, we're saying at least 5 or 6, but we'll see what happens from there. So I don't know, the dynamic of our family, we love it. Yes, there's the religious component of it, but we love having a lot of kids. It's awesome.
So would you say that you have wanted to have kids since before you didn't have kids? Like as a guy, you're like, you know, I really want to, I mean, obviously you have been married once before. I know that.
Right.
But like you didn't have any kids with that previous wife. So was there something in you? What I'm getting at right here, and the reason I'm asking this question is there sort of a male form of like biological clock? Is there something where guys say, you know, I want to have kids at such and such a time, and I want to have X amount of children?
Well, I would say for me, it's a cultural thing, because growing up as a member of the Church of Christ, you know, the people call us the Mormons. I mean, it's very much ingrained in who we are, that family is kind of this eternal and this ultimate thing. And so being very steeped in that culture, yeah, kids has always been not only something I've always wanted, but something that's always been in the menu. The only reason that I think it really didn't happen with my first wife is because, you know, going against the grain of a lot of you guys, I got married when I was 23, divorced at 26, and then remarried again at 26. And so I was just so young that it wasn't even time for anything else to really kick in. You know what I mean? And so we would have probably, had that been a great marriage for that first one, I would have started having kids at 26 anyway. So yeah, for me, it's more cultural than any sort of biological clock.
Okay, Tex, what about you?
Well, I'm going to get kicked off the Red Man group. I actually married a single mom. So I have a 35-year-old. Yeah, I know.
You had a good run, man. You had a good run.
I'm authentic, man. I'll tell you the truth. I still love her. I've been her dad since she was 3 years old. She's 34 now. She's given us 3 grandkids who are absolute joys in my life. I have a 28-year-old son who red pilled about 3 years ago when he hit rock bottom in a relationship. I handed him the book and I said, we'll talk. You know, we've been having leadership talks prior to that. Now being age 57, looking back at it, I wish I had 3 or 4 more. I really do. I regret we didn't keep going. So,
I'm like Tex, with my kids growing up and moving out of the house. Now, the stage I'm at right now, I wish I would have more kids.
Hell yeah. Because you can't afford 1. So what the hell? Might as well have 3 or 4.
Yeah.
All right, Hunter, shoot. Are you having any more? Do you want any more, Hunter?
No, we're done. So I had 4 uncles, 2 aunts. I came from a bigger family, a shit ton of cousins, and I have 2 brothers and a sister. So I grew up with people were always around me. And I knew as a kid I wanted to be Conan, and I wanted to start my clan and just have kids. And then we had 1, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of work. So we had my son, and then 3 years later, and that was planned. I was like, all right, you know, I knew I wasn't deploying. I just finished deployment, and I knew I had a little stretch before I was going back out. So I was like, all right, let's do this. So we had a deployment baby, and then I went to shore duty. So I knew I was home for 3 years. So we had another one. I was like, all right, we're going to have a girl because we already got the boy. So we had a girl. Perfectly planned. I planned their gender. I planned everything. So it worked out for me. And I realized I don't want to be outnumbered. So we're done. And I can't even tell you how many men have gotten pissed about that. What do you mean you're not having any more? Right. I'm not going to create a life to make you happy.
Well, you know, it's funny. I see this even in the manosphere right now, particularly amongst sort of like, you know, nationalists. They're like, you know, it's your duty to have as many kids as possible.
Save the West.
Yeah, really, to repopulate the West, right? And I think that's kind of maybe I just can't wrap my head around that quite yet. But Rich, I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Were you planning on having a kid?
Yeah, we had our daughter after I got married. I mean, I was 35 when I got married, and you know, there was a lot of talk of it beforehand, and it was just, you know, stop using birth control and bada boom, bada bing, there you go, right? But you know, a few years into the marriage and shortly after she was born, I realized that it was just the wrong fit, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life trying to make the wrong fit the right fit. So that ended. But as far as count, I didn't really put a lot of thought into it. it wasn't a huge priority. I think for women, it's, the call is far greater. I'm kind of like you, Rollo, where I was like, yeah, we could do this. So, yeah, I didn't really put a lot more thought into it after that, because going through the divorce really drained my batteries to a large degree. And then, stuff that happened after that. But yeah, I totally get where it was coming from.
I think that the state of marriage right now is something that guys are really struggling with, simply because of the institution and just.
Well, it's hard. I mean, the ROI is very low for men.
Right.
Any way you slice and dice, and I talk about a lot on my channel. I'm not against marriage. The problem is that family law really ruins it, and that's why men have pretty much woken up to it. I mean, I've heard you say that you wouldn't recommend marriage, and I've heard other men.
I can't advocate for marriage right now. I have a fantastic marriage, and I can't advocate for marriage, and unfortunately, that's because of the state of the institution it is right now. I think probably in the past it was great, but like now it's, there used to be.
Well, you have the responsibility without the authority.
Yeah, there used to be authority in being a man. That was actually one other question I had on here as well. So anyways, after we've gone through all this, maybe we can try to answer this question. I'll just answer my own question here. Is I never thought about having kids. I never even thought about getting married. I just happened to be with a woman who I thought, okay, yeah, I could see myself married to her. I can be faithful to her. And then after that, it was like, a year or 2 years after that, it was like, oh, let's have a kid. Is that what we're supposed to do next? Because I never really planned ahead. I didn't come from like a really super religious. Yeah, I just let it happen, right? And I'm just like, well, okay, I guess that's what we're supposed to do now, right? So we had a kid. I'm glad I did. And my wife was saying, would you want to have a daughter or would you want to have a son? And, back then I was like, there's so many males in my side of my family. I'm like, I would really like to have a girl, at least. And I'm glad we did, because it's helped me sort of understand the female nature a little bit better. I mean, I've raised a female human being from 0 to 20 so far. And I think that has really helped me along, just sort of as my understanding in life and all the things that I write about. And, from a Red Pill perspective as well, it's nice to have that as a background to say, I know what women go through when they're being, when they're 8 years old and when they're 13 years old and when they're 20. So I always thought that was great.
I have a bit of a selfish question for you, Rollo, because I got a 9-year-old daughter. So if you could go back in a time machine and have a conversation with yourself like 12 years ago, let's say, because your daughter's 20 now, what advice would you give yourself to do differently?
Gosh, I don't know. I think I would probably just keep doing what you're doing, kind of thing. I think that I would be a little bit more, I won't say involved, because I was very involved. I only have one kid, so how uninvolved can you be? I think that probably, I think there are some things I would have liked to have taught her, like sort of like talents and skills that I have. Like I'm a guy that has a lot of hobbies and a lot of passions and a lot of talents, and I really would like to have, like, say, taught my daughter how to play guitar or something like that. But those are kind of things that you kind of really have to sit down and you have to say, okay, you're listening to daddy now, and listen to me, right? And just focus on me, because kids in this day and age are so scattered in their attention. I think one of the reasons why we think of our kids as having like ADHD, or we're going to diagnose them with ADHD, is because they have so much multitasking going on that, like, kids from my generation, Generation X, didn't have. I mean, we had distractions, don't get me wrong, but we didn't have the kind of distractions that they have today. And I think that a lot of fathers don't realize that your kids are an experiment. They're an experiment in the internet and the experiment in this kind of new age of technology and communications and all this other stuff. And we don't know what's going to happen. And you guys are going to be the ones that find out about all this stuff. I'm part of that too, because my daughter's actually part of that.
It's kind of crazy, because you see a lot of parents, show up at restaurants and public spaces, and they've got their kids with their screens and headphones, and they'll sit down for a family dinner, and like the 2 kids are sitting there with their individual iPads and headphones, and nobody's talking to each other. There's one kid playing one game, the other kid's doing something else on YouTube. And I just don't get it. I mean, like that's not parenting, man. Like, you're not even engaging with your children. Like, what's the point in having kids if you're going to let screens raise them, right?
Right. Or you're going to have daycare, or you're going to have, that's one of the reasons I started with the village here, is because the village is raising our kids, and they're raising it through that technology as well. Anyway, what I wanted to say was, like, the reason I asked this question, I kind of unfairly picked on Ryan there, is what would you say to a young man who says, I know I want to have kids, but I don't know when I want to have them? What time in that guy's life, and what should that guy know before he gets into, like, say, let's say he has to get married, right? What are you going to tell that guy When should he have kids, and what does he need to know before he has kids? And I'd take it from anybody at this stage.
I'll jump in on that. I totally agree with your advice. The guys should wait until at least the age of 30 before they get married. I think you go as high as 35 in the book, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing is when looking at potential wife material, you know, a lot of guys are worried about meeting the dad. Not me. The dad's an easy sell. I want to meet mom. I want to meet mom very early on, because mom is going to tell you everything you need to know about what your future is going to look like. And because that, and also understanding the relationship that your future wife has with the mother. Is it a good one? Is it a bad one? Is mom one of these people that's going to be, you know, in your life, micromanaging everything you're doing? Because that's, boy, there's warning flares all over the place with that. But that's I think vetting the mother in particular of your potential future wife is absolutely critical. And I think waiting till 30 or older to have kids for the guy, because the guys still aren't, you know, I hate to say it, but they're almost like in an embryonic stage. They're not fully developed. They should be spending their 20s improving themselves, getting educated, getting physically fit, making themselves the prize that women are going to want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the reason I'm one of the, and we'll get back to this question real quick, but the reason I'm asking this is because so many guys in this day and age don't have that choice, right? It's made for them. Like the woman gets pregnant, or you know, like my brother, for example, he ended up getting married to the woman that he ended up knocking up. I mean, she was pregnant when they got married, so it wasn't his choice to say, "Oh, I guess I'm going to have a kid at such and such a time." In fact, amongst my friends, I'm actually kind of an anomaly. You know, I was married for 2 years and I said, "Hey, let's decide and have a kid." Right. And most of my friends who have kids were in the same situation as my brother. Like the woman got pregnant and she didn't want to have an abortion. And so they had the kid, and, you know,
yeah, it does force a more sophisticated risk analysis, where instead of thinking, like, you have to think as far back as before you even have sex. And that's like your opt-in point. It's kind of, and people aren't really geared like for that kind of risk, long-term risk. So that's probably why they get suckered into the oopsie moments a lot.
So what do you think? What does a guy need to know, and what do you think the best age is? In the book, I peg that at right around anywhere between 30 and 36, because I think that's right around the time that if a guy plays his cards right, he's matured enough, and he's established himself enough, he's going to have sexual selection far better than he would, say, when he's in his 20s. But then there's the thing of, you know, my cousin Greg has 2 kids, and he is my age, and his kids are like 6 and 7 right now. And I can't imagine being, you know, 50 years old and having a kid of that age. So in my opinion, he kind of like had kids maybe a little bit too late. But what do you guys think?
Well, I agree, man. I was going to say, like, I think 30 to 36 seems like a pretty good number, but it also depends on, you know, your preparedness and readiness to accept the burden of that responsibility. Because a lot of guys really have no idea what they're in for. I mean, they're just like, hey, you just have some sex and don't have any protection, and 9 months later, boom, there's a kid. But they don't really prep you for everything that comes along with that, the changes in the dynamic of the relationship, the changes in how you're able to take care of yourself and get sleep. There's a lot of stuff that guys just kind of like walk into, and it's like they get slammed in the face with this new reality that they have no idea on how to deal with. And I think if you leave it too late, I think you're right, Rollo, because guys that leave it too late in their life, you're not that useful as a father to your children. You have a hard time dealing with the early years, like from like day 1 to about year 3, maybe around 4, especially if you have a colicky baby. Like my daughter would wake up in the middle of the night with like night terrors and stuff for quite a long time, screaming and bawling, and she wouldn't go back to sleep. Like, that's hard. You know, it's obviously hard on the child, but she doesn't remember it by the time she's 3 or 4 years old, but you still do, right? So yeah, I think you got to be smart about it. I mean, you got to be somewhat intentional. I know some guys here, they kind of knocked up their sweetheart and they just said, all right, let's make a go at it, sort of thing. You know, that's the other approach. But I think if you're walking into it with your eyes wide open with some idea of what's going on, it's definitely a lot better.
Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, so I got a lot of things to say about this. I think the first thing is, you know, I totally agree on the age range. I would probably peg it somewhere like 28 to 35 in there. You want to have had an opportunity to figure out what you like, what you don't like, meet a bunch of different women, have a bunch of different experiences. and then not be too old. Also, you want to have your professional life somewhat on point too. Second, I think that you can mitigate some of the family law risks. There are jurisdictions in the United States that have a presumption of equal and shared custody. And if you want to be really strategic about it, man, move to that kind of jurisdiction before you get married or have your license done in that state and try to stay in that state. Also, you can work on, prenups and other things. None of that stuff is ironclad, but if you want to be systematic about it, these are some of the ways to do it. When it comes to being ready, let's say, I don't think anybody's ever like, Rollo, maybe you were ready, but I don't think you're ever like, really, I'm ready. I understand everything it's going to be and I'm ready. I think that there's actually like latent circuitry in our brain that like flips on as soon as the kid comes out. And like a lot of those things that you were worried about, oh, like I won't be able to hang out with my friends, or I don't know, like a million different things you're worrying about, they just kind of vanish as soon as the baby comes out and as soon as you hold the kid and they look in your eyes. And eventually, especially as they continue to get older, they really need their moms, in those early months and years. But as they get older and they start to look at you, and it's like all those other issues, those things that were priorities for you, they just kind of fade away. It's like you don't even care anymore. These become the most important priorities in your whole world. You'll do anything. You'll move mountains. You'll work friggin' 100 hours. You will do anything. Take a bullet to take care of these kids. So like, if you're worried about, it conflicting with your priorities or some lifestyle shit that you've got going on, man, I would suggest that kind of just fades away as soon as they come out. Now, I had a thread the other day on Twitter that ruffled some feathers, and I wasn't necessarily like coming out with a manifesto or anything, but I was just sort of ranting at night and kind of see what would come of it. And I suggested that as men, we have an actual duty to procreate and a duty to create children and a duty to have a family. And it got me really thinking, and it really annoyed a lot of people. I'm not saying this from like a nationalistic, natalistic perspective, but just from like a human being perspective. It's like, that is what we do as people, right? We like reproduce and we self-replicate and we evolve, and there's no evolution without procreation. And that's sort of like what we're doing and what our point is, if there is even any non sort of spiritual point to what we're doing. So I throw that out there. I mean, that's a question that I wanted us to sort of chew on, do we have a responsibility? I mean, it's a very fascinating question, because as somebody who's a staunch individualist, for me to begin thinking about the greater good is like a weird thing to think about at the same time. And I think that all of us would agree that men are beasts of burden in many ways, and we are animals of duty. And is this not a duty that we have to each other and to to us as humanity? And if so, then this is something that we need to figure out how to do it right, and how to do it often, and how to do it best.
Right.
I know that this is going to be an unpopular counter opinion with some of the men on this panel, but I disagree with that, simply because, we have the biological imperative. We certainly have it hardwired into our DNA to scatter seed and, pass it on. But you also have to, I think you have to be woke about it. I think you have to look at the environment that you live in. And if you're going to do it, you have to do it in a way like Jack says, there are states and there are places that you can live where there is default shared parenting. That doesn't exist in much of the Western world. And I know that, a lot of guys will pragmatically say, well, you can't get into it, Rich, saying that you're going to get divorced. Well, the reality of the world is most people do get divorced, after 7 to 10 years anyway. So you've got to be somewhat woke about it. And I don't think that you should, succumb to the pressure of you have a biological duty to do such things. I think it was there's a stand-up comedian, I think it was Russell Peters, and he said something along the lines of look, the brown people are out fucking the white people, so the rest of you guys in the audience there will be beige in about the next 20 to 30 years anyway, so I'm not really sure what you're trying to accomplish. And that's like the comical approach to this sort of thing. So the globalist agenda to me doesn't vibe. I'm kind of like, at the point where it's like, be your own mental point of origin and do it if it's right for you, but at least be decisive and walk into it with your eyes wide open if you're going to do it.
I'm with you, Rich. I do want to give you some on that one. It's, I put it in the chat there. Like, genes are playing this game. We're not playing the game. We're the ball.
I was going to say is that I think that the people that are going to give you the most amount of grief for that, Jack, is going to be the people who resist sort of this traditionalist ideology. It's been said that traditionalism and feminism are just two sides of the same coin. right? Where it's like traditionalism seems to want to place responsibilities on men. When you go and you say that it's men's duty or it's men's responsibility to have kids, okay, that's fine. I can sort
give
of
us
see
the
that
authority back.
Yeah, I can see that. But if men had more authority in that situation, then maybe there used to be a trade-off under, like, say, the old social contract. Nowadays, to say that's why guys are going to push back hard. And I knew that. That's why I didn't get involved in that in that thing, because I knew it was going to happen, because guys, like particularly from a MGTOW circle, are going to say, why is it men's duty to do anything, particularly when it's always a raw deal? Marriage is going to be a raw deal. Fatherhood's going to be a raw deal. This is going to be, and they don't understand because they're not fathers, so they don't understand. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, when you have a kid, I've always said you don't know what like real love is until you have that kid, because when that kid comes out, and you would do like literally anything. Like, you would fight your ex-wife, Rich, to get.
Yeah, I would take I would take a bullet for my daughter. Like, there's no question about it.
Yeah. So when you mix that in, but then you like they're never going to know that unless they have a kid already. But like their only frame of reference is whatever their family life was like up until the point where somebody says it's your duty to have a kid.
Yeah. One last comment on this subject. It's like, and I'm not saying this is what it means. If the red pill means people don't get married and don't have kids, then red pill is like a self-extinguishing ideology or set of principles,
which is why we're having this conversation right here. Because
right. And I don't see that. It's not nihilistic. It's not let's all walk arm in arm into the ocean. This is not what this is about. This is about like the betterment of humanity and realism. It's not nihilism, it's realism. And I think this is a very important thing for us to talk about. And this is exactly why I joined this chat tonight. So thank you guys.
Well, I just want to
think it's about the, go ahead, Tex.
No, I was just going to say, I have a rich family history. Rich. I want it to continue. I also want to have a say-so in how the future turns out. The only way I get to do that is by having quality kids and then quality grandkids. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Hunter.
We were talking about the betterment of humanity, and all that. I think it's more the betterment of self. You are arming yourself with knowledge of reality, and you do what you want to do with that thing. I didn't have kids because I wanted to make sure more Caucasians were out there, more white people. I didn't have kids for any other reason than I selfishly, just me, wanted to have kids. That's it. I knew I wanted kids. I brought them into a world where a bunch of crazy shit's going on. Is that good for them? Nope. It was my decision for me. I wanted that love. I wanted that life. I wanted those things for myself. And when you look at the red pill, it tells you, hey, here's what you're going to have to face if you make that decision. If you get married, here's what you're facing. If you have kids, here's what you're getting into. People are making it a very, it's so serious. It's so, what are we going to do with this global, man, if you want to have kids, you have kids. If you think you're ready at that age, I had my son at 22 years old. Now I was in the military, so it was free healthcare and I had all these other things going on and all our friends were doing it. I was like, fuck yeah, let's have a kid. I had my daughter at 25. I can't say wait till 35. That makes perfect sense. I listened to you and Pat talk and I'm like, that makes so much sense to me. But that is, I would never have done that. I wanted to get in, get it done, get out, and now I will argue the side of the younger crowd where I'm able to coach all this whole online thing I've done with a full-time job, and I coach my kids and everything they do, and we sit down and do homework. Could I have done that at 42? Maybe. I would like to think I'm still going to be kicking ass then, but I've got that, and they're going to be gone out of the house at 18. Like you said, they'll still be my children. I'll still be the father, but I'll be younger when my wife and I are free. I'll be at a younger age when we can go and there's nobody in the house running around. We can do our thing. There's an argument both ways. Develop yourself, build up at, 25 until you're 35 and kick ass. I don't care what you do. As a red pill man, you're not looking for permission from me. Do whatever the hell you want to do, but go into it with your eyes wide open.
They come back in pairs, man. Be careful.
Tanner, you said you had a case for getting married. Well, I guess you would get married and having kids younger.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it kind of echoes what Hunter's been saying. And for a lot of guys, and this was certainly my case, I dicked around a lot as a teenager and in my 20s. And I had this kind of ennui of I don't know what I'm going to do or anything else. And then my wife got pregnant. And for us, one of the most important things was that she was going to stay home full time and be a mom. And so all of a sudden, my job making $12.50 an hour, trying to figure out my career and find myself is no longer relevant. And so the responsibility that I had to accept stepping up as a dad is what started me on this whole journey of self-optimization and becoming the best version of myself. And so not only is it something that when you're younger, Okay, I guess I'm kind of coming up with this on the top of my head, so maybe this is a dumb analogy, but if you think about like metal that's gone through the forge and you want it to be cooled off enough that it has some shape, but not so cool that you can't do anything with it. And I think that a lot of times if we say like don't get married or don't have kids or anything until you're older, you're so cooled off that you're no longer malleable at some point. And so you're unable to actually adapt to what's expected of you as a husband or a father, or your spouse is unable to do that. And so I think you want to be kind of in a sweet zone. And I don't know where that is, but you don't want to be so set in your ways that you're incapable of actually becoming a better version, nor do you want to be so young and naive that you don't have any shape or form to you whatsoever. And then the other thing that I'd say to this idea of the duty of it is, I think a lot of times what we miss out on is in this conversation is the recognition that we derive most of our happiness from purpose, especially as men. And a lot of times hedonism is kind of trying to replace that. It's like a false flag for what true happiness is. And I know from my own personal experience, I've never felt more purpose than I have as a father. And so that makes me find more purpose in my career. It makes me find more purpose in everything else. And that's not my mental point of origin, but it amplifies everything else for me. So that's my experience and my take on it.
We're problem solvers.
Actually, hey, Tanner, on that one, you got me thinking, too, of my sister's baby daddy, she of all people. And he's one that had kids with her really young because he had no purpose in life. He was basically a thud fuck, for lack of a better word. Sorry for swearing in front of you. I know you don't like it.
I appreciate it.
But having the kids now is his purpose. The problem is now he's just like a crappy guy who says he has purpose, but he's kind of like offloading his responsibility onto his kids to be his purpose in life.
Right. Yeah, it's got to be the ignition. It can't be the fuel.
Yeah, I get you. It just seemed like a good nuance to throw in there.
No, that's it. I think that's a very key point to make, because a lot of guys, and then you do where your wife is and her happiness is your purpose, or my kids and their toys are and that's not enough. But I think
they're not balls that you get to play with and then put away. Like they're individual people of their own.
Exactly. But my own experiences was that I went from being a goof off into being somebody who was more serious about my masculinity because all of a sudden I was playing at higher stakes.
Yeah, margin for error.
You should have married my sister. Damn.
All right, so to shift the topics a little bit, we've talked about separating the red pill fathers from the guys who are still plugged in. We've talked about, the right age to get this whole thing going. Something I kind of wanted to touch base on was, and I'm glad there are multiple people here who have both sides, both genders, is what you see your sons going through versus what your daughters are going through, as well as your approach to each. Now, we had touched a little bit on someone was laying game on their daughter. It was Jack, and it worked. Man, these kids, and I've realized this, they are born with that software. They are wired from birth. That is how it works. How I talk to my wife, the same moves I'm using on her, if she's pissed off or going through something, same thing with my daughter. Jack was talking about, the daughter shit testing or having a bad day. It's the same as they go through the whole, it doesn't matter. You just nod your head, smile, cool. That's a shit test. All right, here comes a comfort test. Hey, you need a hug from dad. I love you. I'm here for you. Go play. Your son, when they come in, you treat him like the future man he is. You just recognize guys go through things. Sometimes, you want that pat on the back, that attaboy, I'm proud of you. And sometimes you just want, a nod of respect. It's a simple thing between boys and girls, but we make it very complicated. But the issues they're facing in schools, boys are being demasculated and girls are being emasculated. They're trying to make boys share their feelings and do things like that. And they've got girls that they're pushing onto football or onto wrestling. So I wanted to hear from you guys what you've seen in your areas. I'm in New England, so I'm wondering if it's a geographical thing or if it's, I'm rural. Some people are in cities. Boys and girls are going through different issues.
Can I jump in with a real quick story about girls? This is one I've told on my radio program before. It's actually a story happened to a female listener of mine. So she's a mom. She's got 4 daughters, teenage daughters, and there's a dad in the house. To make a long story short, mom had been busting her butt. She really radically transformed herself, probably lost about 50 pounds. And nobody was really acknowledging that at home, especially dad. And this is why the guys, what a man says and does, not only to his wife, but his daughters, is so critically important. So one of the daughters at the dinner table said something to the effect of, gee, Dad, doesn't mom look good? Okay. So dad could have said nothing. He could have nodded approvingly. He could have said, you look great. You haven't looked this good in, 5-10 years, whatever. But that's not what he did. What dad said was, he goes, yeah, but her breasts are smaller. Okay. Now, I've told this story in front of groups of men and women, and the recoil from the women in the group is unbelievable. All right. But what Dad just did is he sucked all the air out of the room. And he sent the worst possible message that he possibly could to his daughters. And that is your self-worth, your value is tied into your breast size. As a father with 3 daughters, I think that's a terrible message to send. And if he had said something positive, just it didn't have to be anything big. You know, you look great, right? It would have, mom would have been like a balloon, ready to pop, right? The girls who maybe need to lose a little weight too, they would have had an incentive now because they're getting approval from dad, but the dad did the wrong thing. Why? Because the dad was a dick. Okay. But it's a perfect example of how he had problems of his own, but it's a perfect example of how important the father's opinion is and what he says and does, not only with his daughters, but with the wife as well. You can make them or you can break them.
One of the things I tell guys, and I think I wrote this in book 3 as well, is I see a lot of guys who are these kind of blue pill fathers, and what they do is they treat their daughters as if they were their sons. Like they think it's like a litmus test for these guys. They go and they try to make it as if they buy into this idea that girls can do anything, and let's empower our girls and let's lift them up, and what about the girls and girl power and all that. And so they put them into like, you can't play football, but maybe you could be a kicker, or maybe you could go in and do karate or something like that. I see guys that take their daughters to do karate. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. We're taking them to martial arts. That's fine. But what these guys do, the mentality is that they're going to get sort of that feminist merit badge if they go and do that. And it becomes sort of this signaling, or this idea is it's like virtue signaling, but it's virtue signaling in the sense that they want to signal that, like, hey, look, I'm a hip progressive dad and I treat my daughter just like she's my son. And she should be in a superhero. So they push them into superheroes. They push them into all this stuff that maybe the kid doesn't really want to do. Like, for example, the reason I know this kind of stuff is because my daughter is a very pretty girl. Okay. She has been a pageant winner. She has always been very girly. She has always been very super feminine. And I've gone with that, right? I'm like, she's a girl. That's what she wants to do. She plays with dolls. She wears pink, all of this conventional stuff. And I've never tried to say, hey, why don't you, play football? Why don't you get into wrestling? Why don't you? I've never tried to masculinize my daughter, but I think one of the reasons that guys do that, it's like sort of this blue pill ideal, is because they want to signal to other women around them that they're hip, or they're on board with this, with the village's plan for their kids. And then consequently later on, their kids go from being this, we've seen the before and after shots, right? Where the girl is like very feminine before, and then she goes off to college, or she goes off, maybe even it's not even college, maybe it's high school. And she goes from being very, very feminine and very girly to chopping her hair off and, looking like Emma Watson, with purple hair, that kind of look. And I think that guys don't do themselves any favor when they want to turn their daughters into their sons. Raise your daughters as if they're daughters, raise your sons as if they're sons. And I think
I see a lot of dads that do that stuff with their girls. Like they'll put them in competitive, like here in Canada, like I see a lot of dads put their girls in hockey, and what they end up with is very masculine girls. Mm-hmm. Or, I met this one, she was a competitive, like actual competitive swimmer, and she had a back bigger than mine. Like big V-taper back. Right. So it's like, I don't know, like I just kind of like take it along the lines of, all right, well, these are some interesting things that I think that we could kind of do together, and let's see what sticks, and then kind of double down on it. But like the feminine sort of role, like you're talking about, Rollo, I totally get it. I mean, part of what we kind of bang on here about is let women be women and let men be men, and stop trying to blur those damn lines.
I think a great point. And I saw in the chat somebody said it's good for daughters to see their mothers working out. This goes back to how important it is to properly vet a woman. That is the single greatest area that men screw up, is looking at this woman that you're considering marrying or considering, creating a life with. What kind of example is she going to set? You need to be looking at her family health, her education, her goals, because when push comes to shove and things start happening and they have the kid, it does change the relationship. But if you vetted properly, if you were leading well, she's going to do those things. My daughter watches my wife. Again, children follow your example, not your advice. They watch. What are you doing? So my wife's in the garage doing squats, and my daughter wants to show me how she can do kettlebell. Like it's the coolest thing in the world because she has her own kettlebell, and they understand, hey, this is what fitness is. And she's not in there, you're talking about the girl with the giant back. I'm not putting my kid into wrestling, my daughter into wrestling. I'm not going to put my daughter into, these things so I can show everybody else, hey guys, I'm a progressive. I'm keeping up. Look at my daughter. I'm turning her into a man. Look at her beard's coming in faster than my son's, because that's what good families do. It's insane. And to say to your kids, there are a lot of parents who don't say girls don't do this, boys don't do this. We say that all the time in the house, to where my daughter now says, hey, yeah, the boy's going to go cut the wood. My daughter's not swinging an axe around. My son is. It's just, and that's just a weird example, but it is what it is. We have me and my son doing certain things, and he's watching me do it, because as he's growing up, this is what men do. In schools, that message is getting pushed back. It's getting kicked back onto them. Oh, you can all do this. Everybody's a winner, all these things. It is incredible how important it is for you to set that standard and just continue to live it. You can't have the Homer Simpson saying, my son's going to be like Rambo, and when I coach, it's unfortunate. The team, I coach my son's baseball team. My wife coaches my daughter's basketball team, and you see the parents sitting there. They're sad, they're angry, they're just disgusting, disheveled. And you're like, what example are you setting for this kid? Because the kid comes out and he's just like the parents. And you're like, God, I want to do more. So you try to set that example for the community. But there's only so much you can do.
To add to this, I think what's really scary is we're only looking at half the problem, because yes, there's all these manifestations of trying to raise our kids as, our girls as boys or vice versa. But I think there's the opposite, and it's still just as pernicious. I guarantee you that you scroll through Facebook, and if you ever see this man should win Father of the Year, he's doing something to emasculate himself. He's in a leotard, or he's playing dress up, or he's got makeup on, or something else. And so not only is it that it's coming at it from this other angle, but it's also that, yeah, I want my daughters to be girls. And so what I'm going to do is, as a dad, I'm going to act like a girl, and I'm going to get down there in the glitter with them. And that is just as dangerous, because, yeah, it may be reinforcing some of that femininity in them in their childhood, but that also trains them to only be able to identify with, or to only want, or to only be able to interact with feminine men. And so that may not be as big of a problem in that first order of consequences, but second and third order down the line, it's even more dangerous.
I know. Now I know that Jack's got something to say about this. Okay. But I'm going to just preempt you really quickly, because I know where you're going to go with this.
Maybe.
I think, okay, what you said about vulnerability before, I always have a difficult time in saying anything about vulnerability, but I will say this about it. Male vulnerability needs to be less of a strength and more of something of a treat, or some kind of way of solidifying or endearing a woman to you. And the reason I say that is because I think men overdo vulnerability quite a bit these days. In fact, I think that they're taught from a very early age, from 5 years on, that they should be able to out emote other kids. That they should, the more alike they are, the more they can identify with the feminine, the better off they'll be. And I think that's what we're really teaching. That's what the village is teaching them. However, that doesn't mean you should just be this hard ass all the time, and you should never show emotions or anything. First of all, that's impossible. But I do not see vulnerability as a strength. But I will say this, is that when a man whose personality is primarily, very stoic and very, the stereotypical hard ass, when that guy is vulnerable, that means more to a woman than the guy who just wears his emotions on his sleeve and uses it as almost like virtue signaling. Like, look how emotional I am. Look how vulnerable I am. How come you don't love me? How come you don't love me?
Have your first talk with your son after you guys have your fight?
Yeah. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jack. Maybe that wasn't what you were going to say.
Yeah. So, man, again, so many things to talk about. I think it's important for us not to conflate vulnerability with emotionality. Okay. Ivan, I wish Ivan was here to answer this a little bit, because he really nailed it in our talk, our sort of panel at the end of the 21 convention earlier this year. Leadership is vulnerability. Acting is vulnerability. Risk-taking is vulnerability. Anything that you do that puts yourself in a circumstance in which you could be judged negatively or fail is an act of vulnerability. And I think that that's something that I when I speak of vulnerability, I'm not speaking of crying because you lost your keys, right? Like, just to use a stupid example. when I talk about vulnerability, I think it's like it's an act, it's a risky act that is necessary, but it could be perceived in a negative way, right? Where you're open to failing, and emotionality in and of itself isn't an asset. Vulnerability certainly is an asset, because you can't take risks, you can't be a leader without being vulnerable. You, Rollo, are as vulnerable as any of us by putting all of your thoughts into books, right? Because people can dissect them and come at you and analyze you, and you've put yourself out there. That's being vulnerable as hell, man. That's your inner thoughts, your whole brain, your thought processes on paper for people to criticize. Okay, so that's what I mean by being vulnerable. Now, crying or being emotional, I read somewhere like there's only one time where it's really acceptable for a man to cry, and I don't believe that there's only one time, but it's when you've like tried everything, absolutely everything, and yet it still didn't work. And I mean everything. I mean, you have worked till your fingers have bled. You've spent your last dollars. You've recruited all the energy and effort that you've got, and then finally maybe there's like a release. But when it's your first reaction, I mean, come on, that's not going to get anybody anywhere. And this is something we could talk about for a long time. I want to circle back around into feminine behaviors and masculine behaviors. And I think that it's dangerous for us to start acting like there's only one subset, one group of masculine behaviors and one group of feminine behaviors. It's the same sort of conflation that that feminists like to do when you say women tend to be more agreeable than men. They're like, no, they're not, but they don't understand the way that the charts work, right? You've got two peaks over here with a huge part of overlapping areas. And I also think that when you combine some element of biological determinism, which I'm pretty heavily in support of, that there's like a real genetic expression that comes out in the things that people like and the things that people do, and that their personalities and their traits. And odds are that those genetic expressions are going to be similar to yours. So I think that when we're trying to foster like a kid's true identity, sort of just clearing the obstacles for them and letting them become who they're going to be, while giving them a set of values that's going to make them a good and moral person in this culture is the best thing that we can do. And like, you can have a child who's a woman who is going to be more masculine than you would think, but it's still within a normal distribution, right? There's not a gulf between male and female traits and male and female likes and interests and affinities and such. And I think it's dangerous for us to think that it's binary. It's not. It's really not. And there are traits that overlap in a great way. And it's important, I think, for us to just sort of cultivate it. Now, man, birth order has a lot to do with things like my eldest daughter, she is as bold and as assertive as could possibly be. But my son is like 16 months behind her. And because he came up behind her, she was always telling him what to do, taking care of him, clearing the way for him. And this kid, he is my son, but yet he has difficulty like expressing what he wants. And so like, I tell my son this, and I would tell my daughter, but I don't have to. I tell him, repeat after me. I want what I want and I deserve it. And now I don't have to tell my daughter that because she already knows, man, but he has to like learn these things. And so like the birth order, the genetic expression, these are all kind of things that we have to like sort of accept and roll with. And then, you combine it with leading by example. So emotionality is not vulnerability. There's not a binary between female and masculine traits. There are preponderances. There are generalities, and I love to make those distinctions, especially when it comes to like professional choices, right? That's how we get the wage gap. That's how we get all kinds of other distributions that aren't, a reason, because of the patriarchy and oppression and whatnot. So if we're going to use those arguments to talk about why women make the choices that they make, then we also have to respect that when we're talking about the expression that our children have as they're growing up, vis-a-vis like masculine or feminine traits.
I wanted to hop in real quick on that. You brought up the unique aspect of the boys and the girls, how it's not one binary. I hate when people say you should follow your passion and that's what you should do. I think you should follow your strengths and you should let those develop naturally in your children. And then you find out what they're good at. Now, my kids fall into that binary completely. My daughter cannot throw a ball to save her life. My son can launch it across, the field. My son cannot draw to save his life, but my daughter will pull out something like, you've seen Rollo's work. Like she pulls out these amazing things that are just, I'm like, how'd you do that? And she's 3 years younger. So I'm not going to tell her, my son's great at math. My daughter's great at writing. I'm not going to say, my daughter wants to be a rocket scientist. You're not good at math. It just did not come to you naturally. So maybe you should find some artistic thing or something that was more aligned with your natural strengths, and then find a way to align that with rocket, science. And my son, you look at AJ Cortez, he does dance. Who would say dancing is a masculine venture for a boy? But if that's his natural strength, if that's his natural desire, and he can line it with his, passion, then go for it. Don't say, hey, son, you're not allowed to dance. Your kid might be a great dancer. It doesn't mean he's a girl because he's dancing. As long as he does it in a masculine manner, you can have a son that has those more feminine, or what we consider feminine qualities. Guys try to like beat it out of their boys. No son of mine is going to take an art class. Okay. You want to be a dominant dad, not a domineering dad. A domineering dad is going to say shit like that. A dominant dad is going to say, all right, you're going to go out there and you're going to be the best artist. We're going to get you some easels. We're going to hook you up with some paint, and you're going to support their strengths and just find a way to align it. As a parent, you just kind of point and say, go, don't screw it up. Go that way. You'll figure it out. People love to hit me with the question, well, what would you do if your son or daughter were gay? All right, I would tell my son, you're not going to use your sexual preference as any means of promoting yourself. And guess what? You better bring in a quality dude. And my daughter, like, hey, we can look for chicks together, like whatever. But you're also not going to say, because you're gay, you're going to do this, this, or this. No. You're my daughter. You're going to do, and you're going to maintain the standard we've set. I don't care what your sexual preference is. And people, that flips them out. Oh, what do you mean? You're not some angry, bitter red pill man. It just doesn't work. And look, we got the perfect showing right now. I mean, that's just how it works. As fathers, we guide, we point, we help facilitate the expression of self and development of self. We give them the tools and they use them.
Cool. We're coming up on, we're at 6:12 right now. So we got about 15 more minutes. One real quick thing, Jack, I just want to say something is that when you were talking about your son, and you have to sort of tell him to like put himself first, and he deserves what he gets. Like you're giving him that kind of really assertiveness training. Do you think that part of that is because that's what he's learned in school? Because one of the things that I write about in the third book is that kids, especially boys today, are taught to take themselves off the pedestal, to not make themselves their mental point of origin, and to put women and girls, as their primary ideals. Like when they want to say, like, you got to do what mommy says, you got to do what the teacher says, you got to do what your sister says, you got to do what your girlfriend says, you got to do what your wife says. And it's always this. When I talk about mental point of origin, what I mean is that when we are faced with a decision, when we're faced with some sort of choice, decision-making type, especially when it's a big thing, men are trained to think of other people's, and by other people's, it's almost, whatever the dominant, gender is at the time, which I would argue is certainly the feminine right now, particularly what we were talking about, how like, I think it's 77% of teachers from kindergarten through college right now are female. Teaching in a female fashion. That's why one of the reasons I say that, we teach our boys as if they're defective girls. We expect them to learn like girls. And as such, there is this active disempowering, or this disenfranchising of boys. And at the same time, promoting what I call the fempowerment agenda, which is for, empowering women and making the girls, the primary thing. But what I was going to say is that in doing so, I think that, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that boys are naturally born with sort of this idea that they want to put themselves first already, but they have to be taught not to put themselves first, not to make themselves their mental point of origin. And that's why I said, guys, whenever they're going from their blue pill and they're unplugging and going red pill, they need to make themselves their mental point of origin. Whenever there's a decision, they think about, how is this going to affect me? And then they're going to think how it helps how does it affect other people? It's like I said, it's enlightened self-interest. I can't help others until I can help myself first, or I can't help others as well until I can help myself first. And I'm thinking, and I don't have a son, so what I'm asking is, do you think that he learned that disempowerment that you have to sort of re-empower him now?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm sure you can expect this answer. I don't really know, because it's impossible to disaggregate birth order, environmental reasons, and what they're teaching in school, because they're obviously teaching or not, deleting from people's brains like some sort of empowerment, right? Because like my daughter, I'm telling you, like I need like reins on her with her empowerment and her ability to really decide what she wants for herself and to speak up for it. It's a really fascinating question, and honestly, I really don't have the answer. And I know, like, I can see, like, Hunter, I have the Little League example, and it gets me out into the community and I see other parents, and just like he said, man, like you see the kids and then you meet the parents and you're like, it all makes perfect sense. And so like there's this one kid I'm thinking about. He's a leader on the team, and he is an all-star player, tremendous athlete and whatnot, and he doesn't have any of these issues on the surface that we're talking about here. And then I meet his dad and I meet his mom, and they're just like totally classic as we would think of. He's like the breadwinner and she's the stay-at-home mom, and she was really pretty when she was younger, and like they're conservative in this town where it's a very rare thing. And can you tie those two things together? It's entirely possible. I like to promote, and I do this on my writing and everywhere I can. You have to be selfish in order to be a better service to everyone. So it's sort of like a combining the sense of duty but individuality at the same time. I do feel a sense of responsibility personally, and because of that sense of responsibility, I have to put myself first, which is sort of the definition of like the free market, capitalistic Adam Smith hand, the hand of the markets, where like if everybody does like yourself, you take yourself first and foremost, and then you can be it just works out. You're a better service for everyone. I know I'm not really answering your question very well, Rollo, because this is a multivariable problem. There's no way to disaggregate all the various influences, and we don't have any test cases and the control groups. So I think that we really, like we all have talked about here, it's like it's about modeling your behavior at home and everywhere that you go, which is the worst part about being divorced, honestly. I can make the time to have the heartfelt conversations and to give the little lectures and whatever, but it's the absence of them just following me around all over town all the time, and like just going to the grocery store and talking to the guy at the corner, and just the day-to-day stuff where they learn just by watching what you're doing. And so we just got to keep focused on teaching by example, and really teaching that they do have to take themselves first, but out of a sense of duty. There's some sort of higher obligation. And as I get older, I begin to believe more and more in that sense of higher obligation, which blows my mind. 24-year-old me would laugh heartily at the things that I said just now. So it's a learning process, and it's all about your frame of reference. So that's a roundabout political way of not answering your question, but I do believe okay. I do believe it's a powerful question, and one that we really need to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
I could sum that up. It's you're just saying don't light yourself on fire to keep others warm.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good one.
Enlightened self-interest. All right, so we're coming up on 10 minutes here. I just wanted to we should probably go around here. I just wanted to see if we can answer one question here. Is like, if there was one thing, if there's a guy, like right now I'm looking in the chat and I knew this damn question was going to come up, and these guys are saying, you guys are just a bunch of pussies. You guys don't even call yourself Red Pill because you're talking about marriage and you're talking about parents and you're talking about all this other stuff. What would you say to a guy who thinks that Red Pill or being MGTOW is the only way to go with this, and not get married, not have kids? How would you go about having kids by not getting married? Like right now, we empower women to be single mothers. I mean, there's a time where this was like a complete taboo. It was very stigmatized. But now any woman can freeze her eggs. Any woman can go and can go to a sperm bank. Any woman, we basically empower single mothers, but yet we don't do anything even close like that to fathers. That's one of the reasons why I asked you guys about, do you think that there is sort of like a male biological clock? But what do you see, and we can just go around there here, what do you see as a solution like in the future? I mean, you guys are already parents, but like say we're going to give Ryan some advice here for the future.
Thanks, guys.
This is the give Ryan advice.
Yeah, the give Ryan advice show.
All you divorced men, tell me how to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
mute yourself, Ryan.
Right now, because right now Ryan's not married technically, but he is kind of married. But I think he's kind of doing it the right way. But how do you solve this problem? How do we solve the problem of having kids and raising the next generation, being red pill parents, if we can't get married, if we can't trust the women that we're supposed to be with, if we can't, we're not even supposed to be vetting women because they're just all horrible and we can't trust them. We were just talking a minute ago about how men have all this responsibility and 0% authority. And really that kind of dovetails into how men don't get that authority, not just as a husband, but also as a father. Like we want to disempower men right now. So what kind of advice would you give a guy who says, I want to have kids, but I don't want to get married?
Let's start with Drew. He says he has an unpopular opinion.
All right.
This is, oh man. Well,
I saved the tough ones for last.
There are a lot of women who want to come to the United States. And some of them probably have pretty decent genetics. I'm sure an arrangement could be made to bring them over legally, impregnate them, make sure that they're well taken care of for the duration, and sign over the rights to the kid afterwards. There's DNA testing places like 23andMe that could be used both to evaluate them for genetic potential, as well as to be absolutely certain that the kid is yours after it's born. I don't know about the legality of it.
The only flaw with that is she's going to have to be here for about a year, and all she needs is one girlfriend from the nail salon that she works at one day a week to say, girl, once you have the kid here, you can stay here and take half his shit too.
You'd probably want to talk to a lawyer about the whole.
Didn't somebody have that
compound?
Wasn't that an Eddie Murphy stand-up, Unfufu the zebra?
No. Somebody real though. It was like a Black Dragon had it or something.
Mm-hmm. It goes back to that disempowerment or the removing of authority from men. I mean, I don't know what the thing is for like spanking your kids these days, but I think that if a guy were to do it, he would certainly, if you were to ever get like hit for abuse, the guy would suffer a higher sentence or would be punished more, I think, than a woman spanking her kids.
Yeah. Well, they used to do it that way, but not anymore. Yeah. You can't even touch your kids now.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Let me jump in on this. I want to make sure I'm understanding things correct. So if you're a guy and you want kids, but you don't want to get married, that's the question. Right. What would you recommend to do? If I was in that situation, I wouldn't have the child, because I think if you're doing it for that reason, it's for selfish reasons, and you're ultimately shortchanging the kid. The kid needs a dad. The kid needs a mom. He needs both. And to deliberately bring somebody into the world knowing you're only going to offer them half of the equation is wrong, and it's selfish, in my opinion.
And let me point one thing out here before we move on to the next guy. This is exactly what the feminine imperative is telling women right now, that you can be an effective father and you can be an effective mother. You can do all of this. You can raise the next generation of boys to be better boys because you're taking over modeling the masculine for that boy and the feminine for that boy. That's what you just said right there. I've used this before when guys tell me, hey, I want to have a kid, but I don't have a mom. I say that you're basically hobbling that kid. Mm-hmm. And I can't give that advice. If I can't give that advice to a woman, I certainly can't give it to a guy. A kid needs both a mother and a father. Needs masculine and feminine.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I think totally agree with Pat. I mean, we talk about trying to vet the women, this, that, and the other. But Jesus, it's Russian roulette out there right now. Look at the guy that donated to the two lesbians, donated sperm to the two lesbians, and now he's getting hit for child support.
Oh, he got off the hook at the end of the day. I think they overturned that ruling. Yeah.
Good on him. But I'm just saying, it's unless family law is going to change, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. you know, you just have to roll the dice and choose carefully. I still think marriage is the best avenue for having kids. I agree with Pat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to kind of take it from there, you definitely want to have a two-parent household if you're going to have kids. That being said, there's no safe way to do it in the Western world where you've got a safe arrangement. I mean, authority has been removed from the household. The man is no longer the head of the household. The state is. If you get married, if you have children, I mean, even if you don't get married, if you have children in the West anywhere, the state becomes the head of the household. It decides what happens to your access to your children. And unfortunately, the laws are written in a very hostile way, where women are encouraged to behave very badly during the course of the divorce, optimize their hypergamy. So you'd have to do it walking into the scenario with your eyes wide open. I mean, a lot of the men on this panel are married. Like, I tip my hat to guys like Hunter and Pat, you know, the others that have had all the children, and, you know, they're married and they have long-term relationships. But you ask any one of them, they'll tell you straight up, the shit's hard. It's, you know, it's not an easy thing to do on a long-term basis. And there's risks that are associated with it. So if you're going to do it because you really want to do it, and be okay with taking on those risks. I mean, there's certain things that you can do to minimize it. Yeah, you can write a prenup, but those lose value after time. You can't contract custody arrangements or child support out of a prenup. You know, and there's always the notion that women always reserve the right to change their mind at any given time, should 5 or 10 years pass or something like that, and she just deems you, you know, unvaluable, or in her eyes, she no longer wants to be with you. If she wants to uncheck from that, she can do it. It's just is what it is, guys. I mean, there's no safe way out. You know, a lot of guys, especially in the MGTOW community, get an artificial womb, or go to a foreign country and, you know, knock them up over there, or get a surrogate. Or I can poke flaws and holes through every single one of those arguments. There is no safe way to do it. So I'll hop off the soapbox and pass it on.
I was gonna say, you know, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just real briefly, I mean, since we were talking about vulnerability, I think one of the great underappreciated things about male vulnerability is when you get married, there is no more vulnerable position that a man can be in this day and age than to be married. As by basically accepting, yeah, I'm going to take this raw deal. I know that the institution of marriage is completely screwed. I know that you know, I will accept all of this responsibility and 0% authority, and I don't see there being a more vulnerable position for a man than to actually, you know, engage in marriage. And you're not going to convince women that that's any kind of vulnerability, because to them, it's like, for women, it's the best thing that could ever happen to them. So I think when you're talking about vulnerability, I think you need to sort of put things in perspective when it comes to marriage. But go ahead, Hunter.
That was an excellent point. And honestly, Rich covered 98% of what I was going to say. I mean, due to the nature of my message and the nature of my writing, I get this message all the time. How do you do this? You know, how do you have the kids, but not worried about the divorce rape? You guys, you just do you. If you want kids that bad, you find a way to make it work. You vet. You do what you can. You go for it. You might crash and burn. You might lose a lot of money. You might use a lot of things, but you might have some great things. You might have some great memories. You might create some beautiful lives. You know, there's no answer to that. You should not be asking me, the guy online, like, I can give you some information, but I just did it. I didn't have a Rollo Tomassi or a Richard Cooper to like give me advice. I didn't have like some Morgan Freese, like a wise old black man to help me like Shawshank Redemption, find my way out of this. Nope. I just jumped. I said, all right, I want kids. I'm going to do this. There's a lot of risk with that. So every time I should just copy it and just send it to every guy who's asking. Just, if you want kids, go do it. Figure it out.
I'll just say this just to kind of add a little bit more to it. I mean, I'm living proof that you can get divorced and still have a shared parenting plan and live through the divorce process and still be okay. I'm somewhat of a anomaly, you know, I suppose, but some guys don't make it out the other side. Like we know, you know, suicide rates are 5 times higher for men than what they are for women going through divorce. It's a risky proposition, but you can make it out the other side and have a great life. I mean, I've done it.
Right. All right, guys. Well, we are coming up on the 2-hour mark. So what I want to do is thank each and every one of you for being on this. I think that what we are planning on is doing this in a regular fashion. Coming up in January, we're going to be doing a Red Pill Fathers edition. We might not call it that, but it's going to be sort of a married guy's fathers kind of Red Pill show. I think we're going to do it every other week, I think. Is what we said, and Hunter will be heading this up. So if this is your thing, or if you want to get advice, or if you want to have any kind of like, even if you have disagreements, please do. And that's the best part, I think, about the Red Man Group and about really the Red Pill in general, is that we're open to, if you have an opposing opinion, please, come in and air it. That's one of the reasons I like to have as many guys on this as I can. It's a little bit tough corralling everybody, but that's fine. So anyways, I want to thank all of you guys, and just a quick reminder, hit the like button if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell thing that's down there too. Coming up on Saturday, we are having the year-end review. And are you hosting that, Rich, or is that going to be Anthony hosting?
I think Anthony's going to host, but I'll be on it for sure. I think we're going to have a large panel. And just to add to that, we're also going to do the Red Band Group Patreon exclusive content tomorrow on Friday.
Yeah.
So Friday, actually, before that one, I'll be on with Ryan Stone. What time are we on, Ryan? Is it 2?
I believe it's 2 o'clock. Yeah, right after I got a client meeting just before. It's going to be exciting day.
Yeah, so watch me and Ryan on my channel tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have a talk about an hour and a half, just kind of shooting the breeze about the stuff that he does. And then we're going to do with myself, Rollo, and Anthony minimum. We might have a few other panelists join us, just doing some live Q&A stuff for you guys that are the patrons. It'll be a public one because we have a rather small Patreon community right now. But if you like what we're doing, there's a Patreon link there. You can always support us. But yeah, sorry, Rollo.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, and Pat, we're doing a show tomorrow too, right?
I'm going to get back with you on that. Yeah, I'm sitting in for somebody. We'll get more details on that. Right.
Okay. Well,
it's our regular Sunday show.
Yes, of course. All right, guys. Anything else you guys want to say? Whatever you have coming up, Drew, you want to give us a final word there? Drew, hit your, there you go.
No, I didn't really have anything. Just glad to be able to participate, even though I'm not as useful when there aren't fitness-related questions.
That's okay. We'll work something out. We'll get you and AJ on sometime.
We'll have to do a self-care episode on the Red Man Group.
That'd be good.
AJ's
Jack, where are you next? Where are you going? Jack, hit your mute.
Right, yep. Yeah. So technical difficulties. The fall tour is complete, and the spring tour is in works for Democrats are Deplorable. If you like what you heard here, please follow me on Twitter at Jack Murphy Live. Also, find me at jackmurphylive.com.
Cool. Ryan, you're going on with Rich. Anything else you got going? I know you have a new video.
Yeah, the new YouTube channel. I gave everybody a cranberry sauce for Christmas. And this week's one's gonna be pretty good too. I also sent out a little Vimeo thing I did where I showed off my Die Hard Christmas sweater. But yeah, for the most part here, it's gonna be a lot of writing. I'm working hard to get this course up. I want it up here before the end of the spring. It's probably gonna be a game changer for married guys out there in their lives of quiet desperation. So it's gonna be a big deal. Looking forward to it. And that's it for me now.
Right on. Tanner, what you got? Well, you got a new baby coming, so I know what's happening with you.
New baby, yeah. Bringing back the YouTube channel. I know a lot of guys have found me on Twitter and don't know that YouTube was actually a big part of my business up until last year. And so you guys can go follow me on there. I'm bringing that back. And now is a good time of year for you guys who are wanting to actually look like men instead of like chumps to get some coaching so I can help you dress better. So go to masculine-style.com/coaching and I can teach you guys how to do that.
Right on. And text, go.
I'll tell you what, I have, I'm working on a project talking more about dominance and submission, but I did write a blog post I posted today about how dominance and submission is not BDSM. It's not kink necessarily. And I think there's a nice distinction line there. So if anybody's got any questions about that type of thing, texasdom.com, latest blog post, check it out.
Right on. Okay, guys, that's it for this show, and we will see you next month. Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Right on.